very important thing you need to understand about me, and that is that I am not a motivational speaker. I work in the journalism department at UAF. I have never been a motivational speaker. I don't even know how you become a motivational speaker. At least I didn't know at the time. So it's very important for you to understand. So I answer the phone. UAF journalism, this is Rob.
Hi Bob, I understand you're a motivational speaker.
Now, as you might recall, I'm not a motivational speaker, so this seemed a little bit unusual to me. But fortunately, she kept talking, so it gave me some time to think about if I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I hadn't really thought about it before. Is this something that I wanted to do? Hell yeah, this is something I wanted to do. This is amazing. I was going to be a motivational speaker. Apparently, I already was a motivational speaker. So fortunately, she kept talking. Then she explained to me that she wanted me to do a motivational speech about teamwork. Now, I don't really like teamwork that much. I hate teamwork. So when she asked me if I was able to do a motivational speech about teamwork, I said, absolutely, I can do a speech about motivational speech about teamwork, no problem. So then she asked me how much I would charge. Well, since I just found out that I was a motivational speaker, I hadn't really put a price list together yet. So I had to think fast enough because I didn't want her to realize that I had no idea what I was doing. So I said, is this for a non-profit? And she was like, yes. I was like, I don't charge for a non-profit. Because I figured the amount I should charge should be based on my experience as a motivational speaker. So I figured $0 was about the right price for that. So then she asked me, then I asked her, just out of curiosity, I wonder where you heard about me. Because since I didn't know I was a motivational speaker, I was kind of curious about how I got the word out so well about being a motivational speaker. She told me that one of the people on her committee had heard me speak at the Joel's Place fundraiser banquet. So that was true. I did speak at the Joel's Place fundraiser banquet. Joel's Place is a indoor skate park for at-risk youth. But what did that have to do with me being a motivational speaker? Oh! Then it dawned on me. When I had been doing the MC the Joel's Place fundraiser banquet, they had given me one instruction: be funny. That was all they told me to do. And so I tried to be funny right from the start by introducing myself and saying, hi everyone, my name is Rob Prince. I'm a motivational speaker and amateur tattoo artist. Now, because that wasn't actually funny, some people in the audience thought that I was serious about the motivational speaker part. And the second part I just stole from the movie Talladega Nights anyway, so that was kind of lame too. So someone in the audience at that event had thought I was serious about that, and that's how I became a motivational speaker. So we agreed on the date and time, and so now all I had to do was figure out how I was going to do a motivational speech about teamwork. Well, the one thing I knew was that I was not an expert by any means on teamwork, so I figured I could juggle. I figured if I could at least be entertaining, they might be distracted by the fact that I didn't really have any valuable information to contribute to this. So I was thinking, how can I work juggling into a motivational speech? Juggling. What does juggling have to do with teamwork? And then it dawned on me. It takes two hands to juggle, right? Your hands work together as a team. In fact, if you think about it, we got two of a lot of stuff, right? We have two ears and one, so we can tell where sounds are coming from. We have two eyes, so we have depth perception. We have two, lungs so that we can breathe. So anyway, now I have my excuse to juggle. And I came up with this motivational speech called A Team of One. Teamwork is so important that it's built right into our lives. Which was baloney, in case you're curious about that. But I actually started to believe my own baloney. So I whipped up the speech, and the day came when I was going to have to actually deliver this motivational speech. So I decided I'd put on my best suit, because when you don't know what you're talking about, people have a harder time telling when you're in a suit. And I started driving to the event. On the way to the event, I seem to remember I was driving faster. professional football or be born with no arms and legs or something like that. Like, these people are going to see right through me. So I was terrified. I was confident this was going to be a total and utter failure. In fact, I sat in the car for a little while before I went in because I had to make my body get myself out of the car and go up in front of these people. So there I was, and it's the 5 minutes before you make your public speech that are the scariest for me. I reviewed my lecture notes, and I wish that I had something to hide behind. But then the time came, I was going to have to do this motivational speech. So I did my thing. I juggled for them. I made that same joke about the lungs that seemed to work with all of you. And then the speech was over. Now, I would actually like to say that it was a giant failure, because that might make the story a little bit funnier. But actually, they loved it. They thought it was the most amazing thing. In fact, the woman who had hired me to do it said that if I made up a brochure, she would give it to other people. I think I was walking. She would give it to other people, and I could do the team of one lecture a whole bunch of times. So I actually made the brochure, and it was easily the most embarrassing publication I've ever made in my life. I ripped off a bunch of pictures from the internet of people laughing and holding hands. There's a picture of a guy here. I looked at this the other day. I can't believe it. I tried to write with the idea that would appeal to the corporate types. But here in the middle it says, in quotes, so everyone knows, I guess, that I said it. There may be no I in teamwork, but there is a meow part. Now you see how it works. Now, probably the crazier thing than becoming a motivational speaker based on a stupid joke was the second call that I got to be a motivational speaker. This time they wanted me to lead a breakout session and be a keynote speaker after events. And this time I actually had a price list, so they paid me a little bit of money for it. Now, so after that, I started thinking maybe this is going to be a whole new career for me. I mean, isn't this hilarious? I started a whole new career based on a dumb joke at an event that nobody got. So I went online to this motivational speaker directory. I entered myself as the only motivational speaker in Fairbanks. So in case you're wondering, apparently there's some market share available there. And I got kind of excited. I thought maybe this could be a new career for me. And then a month went by, and 2 months went by, and a year went by, and there were no calls. And the only thing that was more striking than my startling rise to motivational speaking career was my startling collapse as a motivational speaker. That was the end of it. So in the winter of 2014, I came up with this idea for a storytelling program. We have a radio program, we have a podcast, we have live events, and we call it Dark Winter Nights. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are all here tonight because I failed as a motivational speaker. Tonight we have 7 incredible stories for you from Marcia Trainor, Randy Brown, Leonard Anderson, Jerry Evans, Jeremy Kellar, Trish Winters, and Steve Newman. In fact, one of you will be telling a story for us tonight. If you found a little form on the back of your program, you can fill that out, at least your name. If you want, you can fill it out as much as you want. Turn that into someone with a Dark Winter Nights t-shirt, and we will pick one of you as a storyteller after intermission. Let's see. So here are the rules about that, though, because I know what some of you are thinking. First of all, you have to put your own name down. I don't want to call out the name and have the person be like, no! So, please, so put your own name down. It has to have happened in Alaska. Your story has to have happened in Alaska. It has to happen to you. It has to be PG-13 or lower. I know we're called Dark Winter Nights, but we're not that creepy. It has to be a story and not a speech. I know that everyone else is wrong and you're right, and I'm sorry about that, but I don't want to hear about it tonight. It has to be 10 minutes or less, and so fill out that form. We've also got the breakup memories. If you've been looking at your program, there's a little sheet there. We'll be reading those over the course of the evening. So if you haven't filled it out yet, you can fill that out and hand that in to someone with a Dark Winter Nights t-shirt at intermission, and we'll read your memories of breakup. Now, I'm sure you're wondering which breakup you're talking about. Whichever one you town was going from bust to boom. We call this story Blue Tickets. Please welcome Marcia Trainor.
You know, that was an amazing motivational speech.
I'm still available, you know.
No problem. Well, I came to Fairbanks in 1970. I was 18 years old, fresh from the East Coast, and I wanted an adventure. I wanted to go someplace really different. And so I came to Fairbanks. And Fairbanks in 1970 was as far from my reality as I could possibly get. I felt like I had gone into some space-time work, you know, maybe sideways into a different time zone. Suddenly I was in a world of, you know, outhouses and hauling water, dry cabins, kerosene lamps and wood stoves, falling out your honey bucket on a wood stove in the wintertime. Dump it out. So anyway, it was really an incredible shift in my perception, and I absolutely loved it. Now, in 1970, Fairbanks was experiencing a bust economically. It had gone into this little boom in the late 60s with the reconstruction after the flood. But in 1970, that bubble just burst, and it was flat as a pancake. And that was a great time to come. Because even though it was hard time, it was a great time because the real character of the town just came out. I was living in a dry cabin out in Esther, but all of my business, all of my necessities took place in town. I had to come in town for my laundry, for hauling water, for grocery shopping. I got a post office box. I did, you know, my banking. And downtown Fairbanks, I discovered very quickly, was an extremely lively place. I don't know how many of you were here in that time or even before it, but there were a lot of people who lived right downtown, right in the core and around the core area. So it was a vibrant place, really dynamic place. There were some old hotels down there, old rooming houses that people lived in. There was the Norndale Hotel on 2nd and the Fairbanks Hotel on 3rd. On 1st Avenue there was one, I think it was called Steel Hotel. Anybody know that for sure? Anyway, the Steel, of course the Northwood Building, there were a bunch of smaller rooming houses, apartments, cabins, homes, right around the core. And there was a grocery store right downtown, right where the post office is now. The NC company that had all, you know, everything you could possibly need. The post office, the banks, there was the Co-op Cafe, which was fabulous. They advertised it as the place where everybody went to eat, and that was absolutely true for advertising. It was a really lively place. I took my baths at the Fairbanks Hotel for $2. You could get a fresh towel and a bathtub with no time limit. So that was really fun. And it was a pretty popular service because a lot of people lived without running water. It was kind of a normal thing. Not just people like me, you know, people who would come up to live in the woods, but you know, professors at the university, professionals, and just people living a life without running water. And so that was pretty amazing. And so there was a lot of competition for those bathtubs at the Fairbanks Hotel. And if you didn't get there on time, you had to wait in line or wait in lobby, wait your turn. And that's really, really great. Because the Fairbanks Hotel was home to a lot of old timers, men who had come up here, you know, in the And some people would say, oh, the Bible is one of the worst things on rural Fairbanks. And a lot of people couldn't wait for it to happen, but how to prepare for it. So there was a lot of talk, a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. There was an office set up to study the pipeline impact and how we were going to prepare for this. I mean, Fairbanks was not prepared to handle the huge influx of people that were going to come in. There wasn't enough housing, the roads were, inadequate, there wasn't enough parking, not enough housing at all. The schools were too small. I mean, everything had to be considered. And so there was all this debate about how to deal with it, how to get prepared, and the arguments and the debates and the discussions just went round and round and round. And it seemed like nobody could come up with a consensus about where to start, what was most important to get ready. And so for those first few years, basically, Fairbanks took a wait and see. We'll just wait until the pipeline happens and then we'll deal with all that. And so those first years, they were really this sort of bubble of calm waiting. And then in 1974, the stages, you could feel that, buzz underneath. Still, people were just to see happen. And then in 1976, I was working in the co-op photo right on 2nd Avenue, and it was like this bomb was just dropped in the center of town, and it just exploded into this incredible chaos. There were men and women, hundreds of them, coming into town every day. It seemed like in a 3-week period, the population tripled, and they were all looking for a job. And guess what? There weren't any jobs because Alaskans got priority. And so all these guys and girls, they were waiting outside the union halls. They'd go to the calls and they wouldn't get a job. And so then they would go, where would they go? They would go to 2nd Avenue because that's where all the bars were. And so there it was, co-op photo, ringside seat in this incredible spectacle. All these guys would be hanging around the bars and getting drunk, and there were prostitutes on the street. All of a sudden, and then people were getting drunk and having fights. There was even a pimp mobile on 2nd Avenue. If you were here, you would remember that. Flashing lights, big loud mufflers. It was like being a spectator in a really weird movie. Only we were all involved. Everybody was offended. Didn't matter if you were working for the pipeline or not. Everybody felt the impact of the pipeline. Prices went way up. Rents were out of sight, and if you could find a place to live, it cost you a lot. So this was an amazing thing. There were people camping out in their cars and in backyards, anywhere. There were people all over the place, and it was just unreal. And there was a co-op photo, just working away from my minimum wage. And the money would just roll across. Pipelines would come into town and they would spend like money could be burned. It was incredible. And it was chaotic. And those first few years were it was like Fairbanks couldn't find its feet. Now, a couple of things happened just prior to the pipeline that really started the shifting of that Fairbanks life. Tragically, in 1972, the Nordale Hotel burned down. It was a horrible, horrible event. 4 people were killed in that fire, including Eva McGowan, who was a very prominent figure in town. She was called the hostess of Fairbanks. She housed a lot of people. And she had lived in the Nordale Hotel for almost 30 years. That's a lot. I mean, that just gives you a sense of how grounded and home the whole corridor was. These people lived there. And now it was just started to see people move out. And then after that happened, the courts determined that well, maybe time for some building inspections. And that seemed like a no-brainer, except that there were a lot of old places that had sawdust insulation, which is a standard. And so we started to see these buildings, old buildings that had been in Fairbanks for a long time, come down. It was changing. And when the pipeline came, it was just chaos. In the winter of 1970, actually, when the winter came, it seemed like it calmed down because, cold is a real leveler. And in that winter, I decided I was not trying to work in the summer. I was definitely not going to have to try and find a parking space in Fairbanks because it was nuts. So a good friend of mine, Judy, Esther, loaned me her 3-speed, beautiful blue Schmidt bicycle named Mary. I was living up in Muscats at the time when the 9x9 driveway happened, and I decided I was going to ride Mary to work every day. And living up the top of Blaine Hill, I have to tell you that going into work was a lot of fun. I won't say anything about coming back, but at any rate, I would get on Mary early in the morning and then zoom down, Blaine Hill all the way into the university, and then I turned down College Road. Now College Road had just been improved, and so the sidewalks, there weren't any frosties, and it was a dream. Riding down here, down College Road on the sidewalk was fabulous. Down past Greenwich Street, down into Lomita with all these lane streets. Good morning, Edmund. I did that every day. Anyway, and then when I got to Illinois, I felt like, okay, home stretch. Really race down Illinois to that curve right around the news miner and going up onto the Cushman Street Bridge. And every day on the far side, sitting on the guardrail, waking up, was an old timer, one of the old downtowners, known as Earthquake. Earthquake was a man that I had first encountered in the Steel Hotel on First Avenue. That's where he lived until it got condemned and torn down. Earthquake was a very imposing character. He was huge, really tall, really broad. He had a massive chest, and he had this "don't mess with me" energy about him. And so I did it. It was just Earthquake. I kept my distance. But there it was, waking up, sitting on the guardrail, and I'd be right here across the Cushman Street Bridge. And so I'd say, "Good morning." And he would say, "Good morning," every day. It became this little ritual that I looked forward to, that sort of bubble of calm before I hit downtown and that crazy life on 2th Street, is what they call it. Anyway, July 4th fell on a Monday that year, and we were getting the day off because co-ops were closed and they were paying us for it. That was very nice. And so riding downtown on Friday, I was really excited because I had a 3-day weekend and I was going to have an adventure. It was really fun. And I was really excited until I turned that corner, that curve around Newsminer, and I looked across the bridge, and my heart just sank. There was Earthquake sitting on the bridge just like he always did. Only this time, he had hung up his laundry on the guide wire, holding up the cable right on the corner of First and Cushman. He had his union suit, his t-shirt, his boxer shorts, and a pair of socks. They were nicely, neatly hung, like, flags of independence waving in the breeze. And I looked at them and thought, oh my God, Earthquake. and I started worrying about it. So I asked around if anybody knew. And pretty soon somebody said, oh yeah, I know what happened to Earthquake. He was given a blue ticket. I didn't know what a blue ticket was. So I asked, and they explained that a blue ticket was a one-way ticket back to wherever you came from. What? Are you kidding me? Earthquake was sent away. He was run out of town. I mean, with all the craziness and everything that was happening in the pipeline, I mean, my God. Earthquake. I've been thinking about this story a lot in the last few weeks, and I realized that the thing that really bothered me about it, I mean, I didn't know his name. I didn't really know who he was. I didn't know where he came from or his story. And the people I asked, they didn't know either. He was just one of those downtowners, been here forever, known as Earthquake, kind of edgy. And now he was gone. And I was really bothered by this. And so I started asking people, do you know what blue tickets are? You know, asked a lot of people, and nobody could tell me. Until I ran into Arnold Breeze. Arnold Breeze was a gold miner who had come up in the early 50s. I met him in the Fairbanks Hotel. He lived there for a while. And Arnold was great. He didn't take life very seriously. I mean, worked hard, he loved his work, but when he told stories, he laughed a lot, and mostly at himself, and all the crazy things that would happen. So one day I ran into Arnold. He was sitting in the window well at the, in the old post office there on Cushman, had those deep sills right here on the sidewalk, and he was sitting there, and so I sat with him, and we were talking, and it suddenly occurred to me that Arnold had been here since the early 50s. So I said, hey Arnold, do you know what a blue ticket is? And he said, blue ticket? Oh yeah, I know what a blue ticket is. I got one. I said, really? He said, yeah, and I came back. Arnold Breeze came back. And I have to say, thank you, Arnold, wherever you are. It just took all that angst I was feeling and it just washed away. I mean, it's not like I thought blue tickets were okay. But here was living proof that if you cross the line, too many times you could get sent away, but Arnold came back. There was always the possibility that you could come back. And if you did, the town would return you away. And that really helped me a lot. Fairbanks changed. It really changed. In a few years, the dust settled and the chaos settled and Fairbanks found its feet. All those old threads, that were sort of just unraveling, they just wove themselves into a whole new department. The flavors of the old and a whole bunch of new faces, new time, new feeling. And I'm really glad for this opportunity to remember those who went before, who really informed the life in Fairbanks, informed our lives, even though we might not have known their name. Thank you.
Gather them, bring them to me. All right, our next storyteller spent 15 years living the quintessential Alaskan bush experience, hunting and trapping with the help of his
And they were rivers as big as the Chena and the Salt Chuck. So there was a lot of country you could get to with a boat. So there were about 20 different families and individuals, families, couples, individuals living out in that country at the time. And all of them had come from somewhere else, migrated up to that area, found some place where they were a little distant from any of their neighbors, and built cabins and started living off the land. And at that time, there wasn't anybody to say they couldn't. So this is the country and the people that John McPhee wrote about in his book, Coming into the Country. So all of us that were living out there had this thing in common. You know, we were all living in cabins. We all hunted and fished for our food. We all trapped fur for our cash. Nobody carried cash at all out in the woods. You know, so the way it would work is we would take our fur into Eagle, mail it sometime in late winter, mail it down to the Seattle or the Vancouver fur auctions, and sometime the next summer we'd get a check. So here's a check for like $3,000, $5,000, $8,000. You know, it's your yearly income, depending on how ambitious you were as a trapper and what the fur prices were and all. You never knew what it was going to be. And you go to the post office because there wasn't any bank there, right? In the post office, you cash a check, and then write a bunch of postal money orders. And then you take the money order out to the store and buy your stuff and leave. And usually you spend it all, and so there wasn't any left over. But sometimes you had a little bit, but you didn't take it out of the woods because there was nothing to buy. And nobody had jobs. Nobody living out in the woods had jobs. You know, they were fully engaged in living off the land. And a lot of people would only go to town once or twice a year, or once or twice, you know, every 3 or 4 years. So there were a lot of people that just stayed out in the woods. One of the other things that we all had in common was dogs. We all got around with dogs, and you know, much into the winter, and then packed it in the summer. And these weren't, you know, the little race huskies you see around town here. These were these monster dogs. They were 100-pound, 120-pound animals. And the reason we had big animals out there is because, you know, there was nobody making trails for you. And we were anywhere from 15 to 20 miles between cabins, between home sites out there. So, you know, nobody was going to break in. You didn't run across broken trails, hardly ever. And so if you had broken trails because you did it, and those big dogs were capable of moving through the deep snow, breaking trail. And it worked for us out there. They weren't very fast, but they had heavy enough fur that they could, you know, sleep without any problem at 60 below, which we used to have back in those days. So, because people lived a long ways apart, there wasn't ever anybody to come and take care of your dogs when you went to do something, right? And so your dogs went with you everywhere. Everybody took their dogs wherever they went. If they were going down to the Yukon to fish for king salmon, the dogs went with them. If they were heading up into the mountains to hunt sheep, the dogs went with them up there. And the dogs would pack deer and stuff. And we would put, you know, if you got a sheep up in the mountains, they would pack meat out, you know, a ham of a sheep on either side, and the dog would walk away with it. It might be 40 pounds or 45 pounds, but these big dogs could take it. So they were useful animals for us, you know. And we got a feel. We never did figure out exactly how much weight they could go, but there was a guy named Charlie who actually matched out dog packing, as far as I know. So he was gonna live for one winter up at this cabin up in the mines on 4th of July, there was a little stream across from the Nation River Mountain, and there was an old cat trail that went up there, went for about 10 miles, and then there was an old mine in the cabin there, and he was going to spend the winter there. They wanted to bring a car battery up there, and he didn't want to pack it. So he had this big dog, Poulon, and Poulon was this But this one was way over the top, you know. I mean, Charlie lived out there eating almost just meat for so long, and he becomes a vegetarian. It was beyond us, you know. We were a meat culture. We couldn't quite grapple with that. So, you know, in addition to just moving around with us, these dogs they were our defense, right? If we had them in camp, we were comfortable that they were going to wake us up. We weren't going to wake up at night with any bear coming around. And they would guard our fish racks or our meat racks and everything. But there was a fella named Tim that really, he lived way up in the Kansas River, and he actually showed what their value really was around bears. So he had this team of pure white dogs, right? And he sewed harnesses out of black webbing. And so it was really a striking team when he would come cruising by. And he taught only French, so they knew all their commands in French. I don't know why, I never figured that out. But he did, they knew French. And so anyway, and he didn't go to town very often. It was maybe once every 3 years, you know. He wasn't very ambitious trapping. He just, and some years he wouldn't even come down for salmon. He would just stay up there all the time. So he had this cabin on this little peninsula of land where the Kansas River did like a 180-degree turn. And he had a cabin right out on the edge. And across the river from it was this rocky bluff. It was maybe 100 feet tall. But because the river hit it in such a way, there was a big eddy below it, and we fished in that eddy. And downstream was this gravel bar, and upstream was a beaver slough, and there was a game trail that went over the top. And so one day in the fall, he's watching over there, and he sees these 2 grizzly bears walk up the game trail, up over the bluff and down into this beaver slough. So he decides he's going to go after one of those bears, right? So he grabs his rifle, and he took his lead dog. His lead dog was this little female dog, about 80 pounds, and she would always walk behind him when he was out in the woods rather than roar around with the rest of the dog. So he took her with him, paddled across, and started up this hill. Now, Tim he made most of his own stuff. You know, he had a hat, a fur hat, he had a nose mitt, because on his first year out there, he froze his nose over and over. And so he had this nose mitt that he had to wear even when it was like 0. His nose was so sensitive at that point. And he made scope peppers on his scope, and they were made out of moose hide, and they were kind of attached to his rifle with this leather thong that was wrapped around one of the scope bases. So he had taken those off, so they're dangling there, and he's sneaking up to the top of this hill. And he was maybe 15 or 20 feet from the edge, and he heard the bears running back up the hill from the other side. They had heard him or smelled him or something, you know, but they were coming back up to see what was going on there. And so he tried to chamber around, and the leather thong on his scope covers fell into the groove of his bolt, and he jammed the bolt down, and it got stuck, and it wouldn't go down, and he couldn't pull it up, and he's sitting there going, what's going to happen now, you know? And all of a sudden, up comes this bear right over the edge, just 15 or 20 feet away from him. And he's thinking, this is how it's going to end. Except, no, his dog, his white dog, this mild-mannered dog that always walks behind him, charges out in front and attacks this bear bark, and then the bear's eyes get about this big, did an about face right back down the trail, right? And he walks over to the edge, and Tim's heart, you know, it's going, thump, 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 you know, and he walks over to the edge, and here's these 2 bears racing up the slough with his dog right on their tail, barking. And he's like, what? Yes, right? But really, all the animals out there saw the dogs as wolves, and wolves, as a pack, are the most powerful predator team out there, period. And of course us, with our dogs, were even more so. But you know, as good as the dogs were, they could cause trouble. They could screw up a simple situation, you know, make it so that something that seemed really simple become really, really hard. And so there was this guy Seymour, and Seymour and I had fish camps across the river from each other on the Yukon. And we fished the St. Eddy at Plain Creek Bluff, which was about 15 miles upstream from the camp, right? There had been a big slide, created a big eddy down there, and he caught fish like crazy, so he could feed as many people wanted to be there. So anyway, Seymour and I in August, so King Salmon season's in July. for the dogs, and we have a net in the water or catch a pipe. And we spent a couple of days down there. We didn't find a bear, so we're headed back up the river. And we don't have a motor, so we're lining the canoe. And on good stretches of the day, we hook the dogs up. 2 dogs can pull a canoe just fine. So we're sitting in this canoe, cruising up the river, and Seymour has spotted a bear. It's in the river. It's maybe a quarter mile up from us, but he's taken off from our side of the river, swimming over to the other side. And the river there was about 500 yards wide, so the bear was only part way across. He had a long ways to go. So we pulled in shore, got out, we took our dogs out of harness, and we're kind of talking in low tones, and, keeping crowds down. We don't want this bear to see us. And the dogs, though, they really read body language great. They're a lot better than any of us read body language. So they're gonna know something's up, but they don't know what. So they're all hyper vigilant. We know that they know that something's up. So we're going down, we're facing downriver and bringing our rifles up. Because usually if you point your rifle at something, all the dogs, they know something's gonna die over there, and they're excited about it. They weren't going with this sham, right? They were going with it. And they were all looking upriver because they know that's where we were first looking. So finally, we had this one dog. He would watch the jets moving across the sky. He spotted that bear out in the river. It's still, 300 yards or something upstream from us, and maybe 150 yards offshore. And so he takes off, and all the other dogs take off running after him, roaring up the bank. And Seymour and I are going, this is not good. This is not good. It is not so simple as it was. So all the dogs get up there. I mean, they might not even know it's a bear. They think it's a beaver. And they love chasing beavers in the water. So the dogs get up till they were even with the bear. And we're crossing our fingers, okay, well maybe they won't make noise because the bear still didn't see it. But no, they barked. And so the bear turns around, lifting the nose in the air, trying to get wind of this, and couldn't. And finally realized he could see the dog, and he knew, well, there's a pack of wolves over there. I'm not going back to that side. So he turns back around and continues his journey, right? And all the dogs jumped into the river and started swimming out. And Seymour and I are going, this is not good at all. And we have no idea what's going to happen when those dogs catch the bear. But dogs swim a lot faster than bears. They're going to catch him out in the middle of the river. And we don't know how big this bear is either. All we can see is his head. And so we're starting to freak out a little bit, but we're not indecisive people, right? I mean, we were used to making decisions, and then sometimes they had to be split second, and then we were getting there, because the dogs were making their way out. So we think, well, we can shoot the bear from here, and then the bear's going to sink, right? Because bears don't float in rivers. A lot of animals do, but bears don't. And so we're thinking, we're not going to be able to live with ourselves if we do that. So Seymour, who was a few years older than me, he has this idea. He said, listen, you have the big gun. You get in front of the canoe. I'll get in the back. We'll paddle out there. We'll beat the dogs to the bear. Right when we're just about on him, you shoot him and then grab him. I'm in my early 20s, right? Now I'm older than me, so I think, hey, that's our best option. So we get in this boat, and we go roaring out there. We pass the dogs, and we got to the bear about 2 boat lengths ahead of the dogs. And I popped him right in the head and reached down immediately and grabbed him, because he would maybe 5 or 6 feet out in front of me when I shot him. And he was on his way down. And I grabbed him by the fur right in front of the tail. And of course, we're moving really fast, and he's like sea anchor at this point. And nearly pulled me out of the boat. Because his canoe comes to a sudden stop. And then the bear's nerves are going to his legs are going, heading on to him like this. And then the dogs caught up with us, right? The dogs jump on this bear, and they start biting him and shaking. That's what they do. And they're in frenzy, And I'm afraid they're going to bite my hand, but they pull him out of my big marlin in Old Man in the Sea, right? So we paddled over the shore, losing about a mile of ground, and drug him up on the beach. And he was about 250-pound cinnamon-faced black hair. You know, they got kind of reddish fur on him, and he had fattened up really nice. He'd been eating berries for a while, so it was a tremendous piece of meat that we were successfully able to get despite the dogs. And in retrospect, you know, there were probably a couple of things that could have gone wrong with that deal. I wouldn't advocate. But most of the time, the problem was things worked out for us. You know, that's just the way it was. Hey, thanks a lot. That's my story.
Well, these are kind of long. Let's see what we got here. 35 years ago, we had so much snow that the puddles in the yard were 3 feet deep. My brother towed us out in a canoe to the middle of the biggest puddle and left us up a creek or up a puddle. Nice. My favorite breakup memory was when my sister and I were walking across pieces of ice on the Tanner River, and the ice started to move downstream while I was still on an ice floe. I jumped across the floe. Good. It wasn't serious until it came time to split up the DVDs. We've transitioned. He said, "I'm taking Castaway." I sobbed, fell to my knees, and stuttered out, "No, you can't take away Castaway. I love that movie." I thought that was kind of depressing. I watched that when I was single, you know, living alone in my house, and I was like, really related. Me and my volleyball thought it was kind of sad. What are you supposed to do when you encounter a bear? Besides shooting rabbit eyes. Alaska radio legend Leonard Anderson found himself in that situation when he was a kid and discovered that the bears don't always know what to do either. Please welcome Leonard telling a story we call Nothing to Fear But Fear Itself.
Right on. Oh yeah. I always like to consider myself a real Alaskan man, and then I follow that. Good night. You know, growing up and being born and raised here, it's always fun to visit other parts of Alaska. It's the summer of 1975. I was 12 years old. My sister Linda, who is about 12 years older than I am, had moved and lived in Juneau, working there as a page for my grandfather Turi when he was in the legislature. She graduated Lathrop here in '69 and went to Juneau and really never left, made a home and started a business there. Actually, a business that is quite common today, but very, very different by 1970s standards. She opened a little coffee shop on the docks in Juneau called Quaffs, if some of you had been there before. But it was interesting. She sold a variety of coffees, coffee drinks, teas, ice cream. This is 20 years before Starbucks, you know, was a gleam in its dad's eye. And it was very successful. So I decided, and she invited me to come down and stay with her for the summer in Juneau. And I was very excited, and I did. At the time, her and her then husband Sid had rented a home out near Auk Bay. Which is 15 miles out of town, out of the city of Juneau. They call it the Valley, is another name for it. Beautiful area. And rented a house way up on a cliff looking over the ocean. Just a beautiful home. And right there along next to Auk Bay. If you know of Auk Bay is it's about a stretch, maybe a mile, a couple miles long, if I remember correctly. Gravel beaches with about 7 or 8 little streams that would come in on their way to the ocean. And around each one of these streams was a little picnic area. It was beautiful. And I would stay there and I would play with the neighborhood kids. And we did what neighborhood kids did. We made bow and arrows and we made spears and we played games. We had bikes. Thank God it was before video games. Because it gave us something to do outside. That's what we all did as kids in Alaska. We were outside, right? We built forts. You know, we didn't watch them on TV. We built forts. We had everything. So that was our world. We had spears. We had arrows. We knew all the trails around Auk Bay, Alaska. And I had a bicycle. Well, about midsummer, my parents decided to come visit us. And we decided to have a picnic out along Auk Bay. So that's a great idea. So growing up in Alaska, I had the experience of being with my father, who taught me how to hunt, how to fish, how to build snow caves. He raced motocross, my old man. He raced in the riverboats in the Yukon 800 and the 500 and all those back in the day. He worked for DOT. In fact, my father says to this day, he invented North Pole, Alaska. Very smart man. So I was very excited he was going to come visit us. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I love my dad. But he did kind of invent North Pole, Alaska, if I may veer off just a second. My dad worked for DOT. And at the time, back in the day, you wanted to build a road, you'd say, hey, let's go build a road. There was a lot of environmental impact studies being done at the time. At the time, he was on the crew building Badger Road. So they built Badger Road from the north end, or from the north end south. And they got done ahead of time. They were done there around Nordale Road, around that end. And they had plenty of time. They were ahead of schedule. They were sitting around the fire drinking beer, and they decided, what the hell, let's punch Badger Road all the way back through to the Rich Highway. That's about 1.5 miles, 2 miles. Okay, let's do it. So they did, and they punched it back through. Then they made a clearing on the other side of the Richardson Highway to put their rigs and do their stuff and everything, so they come back out. About 1.5 years later, somebody built a gas station there. Now there's 3 roundabouts they're still trying to figure out how to use in North Pole. So in a sense, I guess my old man built and invented North Pole, Alaska. He also worked on a number of the highways, the Parks Highway. I remember growing up, camping down there with him when he'd build the Parks Highway. That was always a lot of fun too. We'd go there in the winter and snow machine around Hurricane Gulch and stay in ATCO units while they built the road. He worked on the Haul Road as well. And for years, boy, he would, once that Ice Road Truckers show come on, he would laugh. So really? That's not that dangerous of a road. I built that damn road. And I have to hear about it every time the show comes on. Certain things my old man would upset him as he got older. Didn't like guys with beards. Oh, I guess that's a real Alaskan, he would say. He didn't like inboard motors. What, you can't handle an outboard up a river? Didn't like broccoli. Didn't like the tropics. You didn't dare mention them unless you wanted a 7-8 minute tirade. I was still very excited that he was going to come and visit us. So that summer we was all excited. The folks came, went to the store, got all the trimmings for have a picnic. We're going to go down to Auk Bay, down to one of the little picnic areas. Now, we could have chosen the one right by the house. That would have been nice and easy. No, let's go down to the one at the other end. Okay. I was out riding my bikes with friends. They told me what time to be there. Parked my bike up by the first little camp area. It was actually closest to the house, just a trail up through the woods, and I could park my bike. I left it by the road, walked down the trail. I started heading down the trail to where the family picnic was going to be, a little barbecue. It was about a 1/4 mile, 1/2 mile down, and I had to pass over several of those little 10-foot wooden walking bridges across each stream by each campsite. A little picnic covered area, much like along the Chino Wayside. Went down to the end, had a great barbecue. Sat out by the ocean, did some fishing, had some fun. It was entertaining. And it was dry, which was rare. It was one of those rare summers in Juneau that the sun shined, and I had heard legend there was mountains with tops on them that I'd never actually seen. I didn't know, for all I'd known, Juneau was in a big, vast prairie area, because I'd never seen the mountains. And it rains all the time there. And this particular summer, it was gorgeous. 70 degrees. If you've ever been to Juneau, the water of the place, there's no place prettier on the planet when it's sunny than Juneau, Alaska. So for like 3 days a year, this place is spectacular. These were 3 of those days. It was beautiful. I was on my bike, didn't have the rain gear on. I decided to leave the bike at the first one and just walk down the beach, through the trails, by all the camps. I'd go down to the beach and I'd come back up, hang out. We had our meal. It was all fun. And Mom and Dad asked me, do you want to get a ride back? I said, no, I'll walk down. My bike's at the end. I'll go get my bike. I was 12. I was like Mr. Independent. So they packed up all the gear and walked up to the road, got in the car, and headed back to the house. I decided to walk, and I walked down the trail. So I'm walking, whistling my tune, heading over the little bridges. They're about 10 feet long, each one. I get a couple campsites from the end, near the house, where my bike was, up by the road. Start to see a couple trash cans knocked over. Kids, you know. Kids. Being the Alaskan, I didn't smell danger. So I pass another one. More mayhem. This time, a couple of trash cans are kind of squished. So these kids are like, these are not the kids I want to hang out with this summer. I don't know if many of you know me, but I was a good kid growing up. Shh. So I didn't want any trouble. So I started thinking of what I was going to say when I saw these kids. Hey, wow, cool, man. You guys are far out. 75. I had the bell bottoms, feathered Sean Cassidy hair. I wasn't sure if I was going to mingle with them or if I just shun them like my mom would want me to do. So I had this story all built up in my head until I met him. Got to the end. It wasn't a bunch of teenagers. It was a bear, which I stumbled right upon. I see the trash laying around. I look across the campsite. There's a bear, black bear, pretty good sized one. Wasn't a full male, but at a 12-year-old boy, he was big enough. So I just stared at him for a second, because now my whole story in my head, it's like I had to switch from what Mom told me about bad guys to what Dad told me about bears. Now, growing up, we used to do a lot of hunting out. We got a cabin on Healy Lake, and we fly out. My dad's also a bush pilot, small plane pilot. So we'd had bears come by before, by the cabin. So I kind of dealt with them before, but there was guns. I always felt safe because I had Dad with me, and dogs and guns. We grew up with lots of guns. Even my mother was a champion, very good skeet shooter and trap shooter. She had her own reloader, and she could shoot like nothing. But I didn't have her there either. So my whole teen kid shun thing isn't going to work. I just remember seeing bears at the cabin. And usually bears they're more curious than ever. That's what they always tell you. Bears are curious. They're more afraid of you than you are of them. I remember that one. Tried to keep that one in my head. And I really should have. I had bears breaking into cabins. No, one time we had a bear just puncture the toilet paper roll on our outhouse. He was so careful that he didn't even take it off the roll. He destroyed the rest of the cabin. But he was careful enough because we had a 2-seater. And it had no front out at Healy Lake because there was no other cabins. And it had sides on it so they couldn't see it from the cabin. Sat up on a hill, and me and my cousin Mark would sit there with 22s with our pants around our ankles doing what we do, shooting ducks with 22s. And then sending the dogs for them from the crapper. So it was very easy for the bear to get to. Literally punctured both without ripping them from their dailies. So I was hoping it was going to be one of those gentle bears. So I'm thinking, what did Dad say? I could do several things. I could do the curl up in a ball thing, but I think that was a little bit premature. I think I should wait till he makes his move. Otherwise, it might look kind of silly. I could do the be bigger than the bear. Be bigger than the bear. At this point, the bear stood up on his hind legs. I wasn't going to be bigger than the bear. Some of the other things they say. Oh, let's see, it's a black bear, run down a hill. Okay, there's no hill. There's the ocean. I had that in my mind. I could do that. I could go there. But it was a big, pretty good little stint between there and the water. So I just back off. Head back the trail, walk away, nothing to see here. It's all good. I start walking backwards. The bear gets down off his hind legs, starts walking towards me, slowly. So I back up a little faster, he comes a little more. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just turn around and, like I didn't see the crime. Maybe he thinks I'm going to turn him in for the mayhem or something. It's like, no, man, your secret's good with me. I'm cool. I saw nothing. I don't even know your name, where you live, nothing. So I start walking up the trail. He's walking up the trail too. Walk a little faster up the trail. He's walking up the trail a little faster too. At this point, I decided to do the one thing you never do around a bear. I ran. The tough Alaskan man in me ran. Frightened. And all I can remember, those bridges I'd crossed so many times. I was moving so fast. I was the fastest 12-year-old white boy on the planet. I was moving. All I remember is the sound of one shoe hitting each of those bridges. I remember it distinctly. These were like 10-foot bridges. I'm just thump, thump, thump. I turn around. That bear is not 20 feet behind me. I am sprinting at this point. And I can feel it, and I can feel it building. I'm starting to panic at this point. I didn't want to do that. I see the bear, and then I'm running, and I can hear him. But it's the strangest noise I've ever heard from a bear. And I'd been around him a couple times. It was like almost, Pretty soon I hear, Might look better for this. That's when I see the whites of this bear's eyes. I'll never forget it. They were huge. They had little tiny pupils. But he was running right behind me. He's probably not 10 feet behind me at this point, and he's doing this. That's when I did the second stupidest thing you do around a bear. I pulled to the side, and I stopped. And I turned and I did this. So that's what scares a bear. 12-year-old boy in bell bottoms who looks like Sean Cassidy doing this. I swear to God, that bear's forelegs went, and he looked at me, and he went, ah! Which was basically doing, what the hell are you stopping for? It's probably still chasing us. This is when I realized the bear wasn't chasing me. He saw me running from something. Survival instinct. He looked at me and went, ah, you can stay here, I'm gone. And he continued up the trail past me till all I could hear was, oh! Really, that's my goddamn bear story? So, somebody would have nicked me on the way by, you know? What happened, bear? No. So I'm pretty shaken, pretty sure I'd wet myself a little. Walk back down the trail now that I know it's safe. There's no juveniles, there's no bears. I go and I get my bicycle and I head back to the house. I walk in the house, I go, my God, the whole family's there doing whatever, and you'll never believe what just happened. I was just chased by a bear. Well, kind of, it was like a bear, and he was like chasing me, he was right behind me. And they start laughing, and nobody believed me. And I was so mad. I went outside and I sat by the ocean and I was watching the sun was setting. It was a beautiful night and they lived right on that cliff, and I just sat down and I sat and I cried. I think some of it was just the stress from what had just happened and the fact that my family didn't believe me. And I was so mad. And then I felt a hand on my shoulder. And it was the old man. And he goes, what do you say we head up and look for that bear of yours? I went, thanks, Dad. So, Dad and I headed up the trail, looked, we walked almost all the way. He walked with me, we talked about everything and complained about inboards or whatever. Nothing. We got all the way to our camp area. We headed back. He saw the trash and saw it was obvious something happened there. So these look like they could probably be some tracks, and luckily we go back to the end, and right across the way comes that bear right in front of us. Just looked at us and ran by. Just kept going. It's almost like he was still scared. He just come from the water. He'd been by the beach. He just came and whoop. I go, Dad, 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 Dad. I go, I see him. He goes, I see him. I see him. And he was, he had that look on his face because Dad always believed me. He was always there, well, we better check it out. He was always the guy that had my back. So we got to go back, and thank God for my dad, I got redemption. It's a story I still like to tell to my dad. He's a little older now. He's in the Pioneers home. He's got Alzheimer's. So the guy that was the smartest guy I've ever met in my life is now kind of the mind of a child. And he's always happy, though, now. He's really happy. And I can tell him all these stories, and the best thing that I have now is I get to tell them to him over and over and over again. And he loves it every time. And I can't wait tomorrow to go back over to the Pioneers home and go, hey, Dad, remember that time that bear chased me in Juneau? And he's going to go, yeah, that was great. And I'll tell it to him again, and I'll probably tell it to him again Wednesday during coffee time. That's my show.
Leonard, ladies and gentlemen. All right, it's time to pick our storyteller from the audience. Are you ready? So, let's send in the drone. It's not the fastest drone. It's blowing my notes away. You might be asking yourself, what's the point of the drone? There's no point, it's just awesome. No reason we had it at all. It's just because I wanted to yell, send in the drone! Okay, you ready for our storyteller? Travis, could you do a little, that thing where you bang the two sticks together really fast? There we go. Alexandra Dunlap. Round of applause. She apparently got distracted by the cupcakes. Oh, here she is. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Now I made her mad. I didn't mean anything about the cupcakes. I was just ad-libbing. So over here, maybe it was something else. Yeah, in retrospect, that was a bad idea. Now I have an angry storyteller on stage telling a story I've never heard before. So you guys coming to the after party? Anybody? Meet the storytellers? I'm going to bring those pamphlets that I made. 25 lucky people will get to read my motivational speaking pamphlet. Alexandra, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
I'm shorter than you.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we gotta work on printing here. During the circle flood a few years ago, I connected a generator to the tribe's office. I needed to pull through the woods via a six-wheeler. Page 2. When I went back after installing power, everyone asked, "How is everyone doing?" All was very good as we sat by the river sharing a bottle and eating ducks. The generator, miles from us. Okay, awesome. We'll make bigger forms next time, I guess. First float down the Chena. Through town, we get to the Botel bar, walk in, and the locals ask, "How'd you get here, snow machine?" We said, "No, canoe. The river is open." They respond, "Wow, we didn't notice." I love this one, it's another two-pager. One April, I had a fight with my boyfriend and stopped outside to drive off. I gunned the car too fast and stuck the tires in the break-up mud. Outside his apartment, in the noisy road, I rocked that car back and forth for an hour. Mired to the axle it was, so I gave up. I went back and knocked on his door, swallowing my pride, but when he opened it, he was so happy to see me back and full of apologies. We made up. I didn't mention the stuck in the mud car until next week. Alright, I'm really in the mood for a song from Thought Trade and Emily Anderson right now. What are you going to play for us? Okay, Thought Trade with Emily Anderson. During work, he wrote to me on Facebook Messenger and said, "This isn't working, you should come get your stuff." We had been dating for a year and a half. I didn't see him for 5 months. I was sort of hoping there was a backside to that. All right, well, if that's your favorite breakup memory, I hate to hear what the worst one is. All right, it's time to pick our storyteller from the audience. Are you ready? Remember the rules. So when I call your name, you come up on stage and find Colleen over here. She'll guide you all onto the stage. And then afterward, we'll have you go out the back here. We have some swag for you. You need you to sign a form. Waiter. So, let's send in the drone. It's not the fastest drone. It's blowing my nose away. You might be asking yourself, what's the point of the drone? There's no point, it's just awesome. No reason to have it. It's just because I want to yell, "Send in the drone!" Okay, you ready for our storyteller? Travis, can you do a little, that thing where you bang the two sticks together really fast? There we go. Alexandra Dunlap. She apparently got distracted by the cupcakes. Oh, here she is! Okay, sorry. Thank you, now I'm here. I didn't mean anything about cupcakes, I was just adding. So over here, maybe it was yeah, in retrospect, that was a bad idea. I have an angry storyteller on stage. So you guys come to the after party? Anybody? Meet the storytellers? I'm going to bring those pamphlets that I made. 25 lucky people will get to read my motivational speaking pamphlet. Alexandra, it's a pleasure to meet you. Oh yeah.
Thanks. Thanks so much. I'm going to suck in my overfill cupcake. I was born in Los Angeles, California. I was born and raised there, and in my early 20s, okay, 19, I met this adorable redhead at a party that my sister was throwing, and I fell in love with him, and I married him, but was not aware that previous to marrying a boy from Alaska, you're supposed to put information like that in your prenup, so you don't ever have to move back here. So we moved back. He was very, very sweet to me. We lived in Denver for a couple of years before moving here, so I actually got to see what snow falling from the sky looked like. And then we came up to the interior. So I'm used to growing up with freeway offering noise at night, helicopters, arms fire, but from small, handguns, and crack pipes from on. So there were some things that I wasn't quite cracked for. So when we were here about 2.5 years, it was a lovely spring morning. We had almost, not a bunch of ice left on the ground. And I walked my children out to the bus, and I noticed that there was what appeared to be a dead moose in the back of one of our paddocks. We lived in a larger piece of property. And so to protect my children, or to protect myself with the excuse of protecting my children, I did one of these, covering up the large moose with my body to get them up to the bus stop. And immediately came home and I called Fish and Game. And they said, "Well, ma'am, we need you to go over to the carcass and see if any of your neighbors to his boss and he said, "There's a dead moose in my yard, I have to go home and process it." And he said, "Oh yeah, go." Who knew? That's an excuse for getting out of work. And so he came home. At home, he called a couple of his buddies. And they also got off work. And showed up. But by that point, my lovely husband Adam had already started to process the beast. It was told to me quite gently that moose don't usually wear their heads on backwards. And so it most likely snapped its neck in our fence, because the fence was over all moose. And so Adam's processing it. He goes, I think that this is maybe the first year this moose has been out on its own, the first spring. And he said we had those two that had been calved a year and a half ago. They were twins, and they wandered around our neighborhood. One has been a barn, and for a while it apparently was like a really great place to get down and give moose birth. But then we shut the door, so they couldn't shoot it. And so there was theories that were flying around. Unfortunately, my very capable Alaskan boy husband was not able to locate any of his hunting gear, so he processed the moose with his fishing knife, which I'm told is like, whoa. So we were looking at it, and the processing was happening. His friends, David, Thad, I'm not using last names to protect the innocent. They all came over. There was like, an assembly line. Ford would have been really proud of like how everything was set up. And it was getting wrapped and labeled. And we were talking a little bit about the potential for, what had happened to the moose. And my eldest son said, well, they were the same age, the twins. He goes, maybe it was just like bad moose decision. Like they had been partying all night, and one of the moose said to the other moose, dude, I bet you can't get through that fence. And I said, well, they're not surfers, so I think I'd say man. Man, you can't get through that fence. And it turned out obviously to be a bad idea for the moose, but one of the reasons why, as a family, we had to rule it a suicide is because not only am I an LA girl, but I'm a Jewish LA girl, and for the meat to be kosher, it really had to go down as a suicide. So I worry about what the moose is not going to have, but I'm pretty sure we haven't seen her lately, so I think that she's okay with it. It's better than the teenage mooses daring each other to do something dangerous. So I just want you all to know that while I'm not a rabbi, I believe that yes, a moose having committed suicide is kosher, and that we, young moose, should not let other young moose make stupid decisions.
Thanksgiving was still lasting every day. And I knew I was going to do that tonight. That last one was a breakup during breakup. Did anyone else pick that up? I was the only one sitting there like, dawned on me, and I was writing up while writing a song. I was like, congratulations on breakup! Yeah, it did. The year when breakup just never would come. It snowed so much that winter and stayed so cold so long, we track parents were shoveling 2 feet of snow off the bleachers at the first track meet. It even snowed at the state track finals in Fairbanks that year in May. It was spring of '06. I thought I'd met true beauty, but it concealed a cold heart. tired of treading on thin ice. There was a huge meltdown, but in the end, I was glad that season was over. Should be a poet. The Sunday we drove to Nenana, we got into town walking over the train trestle. On the way back, as we were on the trestle, we heard what we thought was a rifle shot. But suddenly the ice began to move out from under us. The kids screamed as they thought the trestle was falling. What a wonderful memory to have. That is a wonderful memory. Children scared. Our next storyteller lived through a devastating Fairbanks event and left an indelible mark on more than just his memories. Here's Alaska radio legend Jerry Evans with a story we call The Dent He Left Behind.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Rob. For my story, we're going to set the Wayback Machine to Fairbanks, Alaska, summer of 1967, 925 Cowell Street to be exact. Now me, I was 6 years old at the time, and my entire universe was no more than 5 blocks in every direction. It's like everything I needed. I had a playground, I had a toy store, had vacant lots to play in, I had a little hill to jump my bike over, my school, my best friend, everything I needed was within that 5 blocks in any direction, including my school. Because 6 years old, I was a first grader at Barnett Elementary School, which was only 1 block from my house. And here's something kind of weird that I want to share. I am currently married to the current principal at Barnett School. I know, how weird is that, right? Like, karma has a sense of humor, that's for sure, because if you would have told 6-year-old Jerry that he was going to marry his principal, he would have told you you're out of your frickin' mind, because, or actually I probably would have said something a little wittier like, you are, or the always classic, I am rubber, you are glue, something like that, but my principal? I don't know. My kindergarten teacher, maybe, because my kindergarten teacher was Ann Ween, and Ann Ween, like my mom, was a saint. But a principal? One of those mean, scary people that drills a hole in the paddle so it doesn't cut through the wind easier, so it takes less time to go from the backhand down to my ass. I'm going to marry one of those? I don't think so. But of course I did. Her name's Dana, and I couldn't be happier about it because she's here. So the thing about 1967 in Fairbanks, Alaska, there was only supposed to be one thing that was exciting and that was supposed to change the way things were going. That was the summer that we welcomed A67. I don't know if any of you know what that is, but of course that is a theme park which is supposed to have kind of an Alaskan Fairbanks theme to it. It was called A67. Shortly thereafter, they changed the name to Alaska Land. And much to the chagrin of many here, they changed it again to Pioneer Park. That is the correct response, thank you. And the reason why they changed it from Alaska Land is because they didn't want the tourists to think that it was like some kind of amusement park, like Disneyland. I don't think there was a chance of that happening. Put it this way, there were 2 rides at Alaska Land, and the carousel was the more exciting of the 2. So that was all that the summer was supposed to be about, is A67, but then it rained. And it rained some more, and it rained a whole lot that summer. As a matter of fact, in July, in the Fairbanks area, we got 3 inches of rain, which is about twice the normal amount. And in a 1-day, 24-hour span between August 11th and the 13th, 24 hours, 3.5 inches of rain hit Fairbanks. It's a record that still holds today. Well, of course, that's a lot of water, and the river couldn't hold it all. So, of course, the A67 became second-page news to the Great Flood of 1967. Now, I should tell you as I'm going through this story and remind you, I was only 6 years old at the time. So my memories range from vague to non-existent on a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I was just a young guy, and I was trying to put it all together, trying to I go back to these little places to try to remind me of where I came from. Now, my dad, when the flood hit, my dad wasn't there. Of course, my dad was rarely there, nothing nefarious. He worked a lot. I mean, he worked a lot. He would work up north. He would leave for weeks at a time and go somewhere. And even when he was in town, during his time off, my dad built houses in town to sell to try to make a better living so he could support his family. So my dad wasn't around very much, and I don't begrudge him any of that because he was a very hard worker. But even when he was around, it seemed my dad, he was a quiet guy. He wasn't much of a talker. So we never really, I can't remember any conversations I had with my dad. The only thing I can really remember distinctly him saying to me was, "Get me the belt." And I heard that a lot. I don't hold it against him because I deserved it, I'm sure. So I got that a lot. Bring me the belt, occasionally bring me the switch, every once in a while bring me the Hot Wheel track, then go ask the principal if I can borrow the paddle. So my dad wasn't around very much, and he wasn't there when the flood hit. It was just me, my two older brothers, and older sister, Ben, Don, Joanne, and my mom. So again, my memory's a little vague at that young age, but I do remember the day that the flood hit because something was different. This day was not like the others. This was not the norm. There was way too much noise and excitement way too early in the morning in the Evans house. So my brother came in and woke me up, and he said that the flood had reached the house. And I was 6 years old. I kind of vaguely remember somebody's blah, blah, blah flood, but we didn't think it would hit the house. But it sure did. So first thing I did is I ran out to the banister and I looked over our stairwell that separated the two floors of our split level home. And sure enough, the water was coming in, going right down the stairs. It was about a foot or two high outside the house and everywhere around us, about halfway up our daylight basement. And everybody was doing the best they could under the circumstances. Well, everyone else was doing the best they could. I was pretty much staying out of everybody's way, which was probably the best thing for a 6-year-old to do. And I remember vaguely, but my mom remembers distinctly, me at 6 years old folding paper into boats, sitting at the top of the stairs and watching them go down to the basement. Yeah. Another thing I remember is somebody yelling from outside, so we all ran to the windows. Well, there was these two guys in a flat-bottomed metal boat, and they were trying to find people who needed to be evacuated because obviously we could not stay there. So they said they were here to take us to higher ground, so we grabbed what we could. And when they came to the house for us to climb out of the upstairs window, they kind of banged into the house a little bit, and we didn't shake the house. It wasn't like a big bang, but I remember looking down and they put like a little dent in the aluminum siding of our house. Didn't think anything of it at the time because there was a lot going on in my mind, like, my first boat ride. So we got in the boat and they took us actually here to Lathrop High School, which was out of my comfort zone, but yet the biggest building I'd ever been in before. So the next 10 to 14 days are kind of a blur because I was moved around from place to place. We went from Lathrop, we got on a flatbed truck, went to the airport, Allison Air Force Base, down to Anchorage, and about 2 weeks later we came home. And I do remember coming home because my dad had obviously been there for a while and had done a lot of work. We came home, and as far as I knew as a 6-year-old boy, the house was the same as we left it. And it didn't just happen by itself. My dad worked, as he always does, really hard. He had to have got out there, got the water out, had to fix the furnace, probably bought new furniture, but at 6 years old, you don't think about those kind of things. All I knew is I was back home, and this was my house, and everything was just the way we left it, as far as I was concerned, except for that dent in the side of the house. For some reason, my dad didn't fix that. It was there. So fast forward to me in adulthood, which is a period of life my principal wife isn't sure I've fully gotten to yet, but for the sake of the story, let's just say I was all grown up at this point. And what I do, and I do this a couple times a year, I get on my bike and I go around to the old neighborhoods and check out the houses that my dad built and kind of look around and see what's going on. It kind of grounds me a little bit. I'll ride down some of the sidewalks that are still exactly the same as I left them. But over the years, when I go back and visit the house, things change. They change everywhere, but they change around our little neighborhoods. It's like the houses my dad built have been sold and repainted many times over. My favorite vacant lots now have houses on them. The school that I grew up in now has 2 additions on it. It doesn't even look the same. Everything's changed. I've seen in my old front yards, bushes grow into trees, get cut down to stumps, got turned into holes, and then shrubs again. So it's kind of, everything changes, and all the stores, my favorite stores, Betty Claire Toy Store, Lindy's Grocery, Denali Store, those things have been gone for over 40 years, but I keep looking around for that little thing that's gonna give me that feeling. And if you've ever gone home or gone someplace that you grew up, you know the feeling that I'm talking about, where it's kind of, it's just hard to explain, but it's a place that I like to go to. The longer years go by, the fewer of those signs that I see. But the one thing that is still there and always brings me back is that dent in the house on Cowell Street. It's still there. It's one of the only things that's still right as I left it at age 6 years old. And I always wonder why my dad didn't fix it. Well, why didn't he do anything about it? I mean, is he lazy? No, not my dad. He's a workaholic. Did he not have the skills to do that? Are you kidding me? The guy built houses. It would have been so easy for him to spackle that, sand it, and paint it, and nobody would have known the difference. But for some reason, he never did anything about it. He left that dent there, and I don't know why he did that. And I'll never know why he did that, because my dad passed away when I was 18 years old, when I was away in the Marines. And me and my dad didn't talk much, but at 18 years old, that's kind of when you need to talk to your dad the most, because I mean, I had a lot of questions, and my mom was great raising me, but she couldn't answer some of the questions I was gonna ask him. You know, you talk to your dad, you want to sit down with him as adults and talk about life, you know, talk about women. I had a lot of questions, you know, like, why did you never fix the goddamn dent in the side of the house on Cowell Street? So I go by there year after year and I check things out, and this happened several years ago. I was driving around down Smythe through 8th Street and then by the house on Cowell Street, and there was a teenage kid outside just kind of tooling around. And I should probably mention, at that time I was doing morning radio on the #1 station in town, so a lot of people knew who I was. Some people call that big fish, small pond. I think it's really more like medium-sized fish, big puddle. I mean, let's be honest. But nevertheless, the kid recognized me, but still, I introduced myself and I said, my dad built this house, and I used to live right up there in that room. And he got excited as I did, and so he invited me in, and we took turns giving each other tours of this house that I used to live in when I was 6 years old, that my dad built. And so after we spent a little time together, we walked outside, and of course I look over at that dent, and I said, do you know how that dent got there? And he's like, no. I said, yeah, I told him the story. I told him the story about the day the flood came and the guys came to whisk us off to safety and knocked into the siding and put a little dent in there. And as I'm telling him this story, the kid's eyes are getting like bigger and bigger, right? And when I'm done, he goes, are you kidding me? My mom blames me for that. Yeah. He's like, she won't believe I didn't do that. I've been put on restriction because of that dent. So we both laughed about it, and as I rode away on my bike, he's like, I can't wait to tell her that it wasn't me. I told her it wasn't me. So one of two things probably happened that night. I'm hoping this was the case, that they sat around and had a nice family dinner. And then the boy got to tell the mom and the rest of the family about how the den got there and the history of the building, and they got to have a nice discussion about honesty and truth, and maybe after dinner they all had a group hug. Or, and this is probably the more likely scenario, Mom came home and he blurted out, hey, you know that guy we listen to on the radio every morning? He said a boat put that dent in the house. And he got put on another week of restriction probably for not being honest. So So I still do it. As a matter of fact, I found out I was going to do a story here tonight, and I thought, well, that would be kind of a cool story to tell. So I got on my bike again about 3 weeks ago. Snow's gone enough, roads are dry enough. I went through all the neighborhoods, and I stopped, and I looked at that dent in the house on Cowell Street, and I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe my dad knew what he was doing when he left that there. Maybe he knew that as an adult, I'd drive by and I'd look at that dent, and it would remind me of a simpler time and take me back to when I didn't have a care in the world. Maybe he knew that by looking at that dent, I'd remember the times when me and my two brothers and my sisters could all fit on my dad's lap while my mom ran off and grabbed the Polaroid. And maybe he knew all that. Maybe he knew when I looked at that dent that it would take me back to that feeling where no matter what was going on in the world outside, whether there were riots somewhere, wars somewhere, whether there was a flood in town, no matter what was going on outside those four walls, that I would remember what it felt like to be there with my family and feel safe and be safe in that house with my family. So maybe, just maybe, that's exactly why my dad left that dent in that house on Cowell Street. Thank you.
Jerry Evans. I just want my daughter to know, if she's watching the video of this event tonight, long after I'm dead, that the loose board in the ceiling over the living room is not a message to you from me. I'm just too lazy to fix it. Our next storyteller is a dedicated Alaskan and star of his own TV program on the Discovery Channel called Edge of Alaska. And he's come here to tell us about a time when the only option for winning the battle was not to fight in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Kellar telling a story we call There Is No Fight. Because it was actually a really deep puddle. I hate that. Wake up when you realize you've been driving through your neighbor's yard all winter. Was dumped on my birthday, he still fixes my car. Friend with benefits, that's right. Okay, so up next. Our next storyteller is a dedicated Alaskan and star of his own TV program on the Discovery Channel called Edge of Alaska. And he's come here to tell us about a time when the only option for winning the battle was not to fight in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Kellar telling a story we call There Is No Fight.
Wow, this is really awesome. As I've been watching this tonight, the thought keeps going through my head is this is community. That's a beautiful thing, and I'm honored to be here. This is a story about a lesson that I learned, and it came through a long conversation I had with a man named Robert Hale. Many of you will know him as Papa Pilgrim. And our conversation took 2.5 years to complete. I never found it easy to walk away from a confrontation. In fact, in my world, if it came to fight or flight, it was fight every time. And why shouldn't it be? I was fighting a good fight. Right? Maybe not. I'm not comfortable with standing in front of me and open my minds. Robert Hale, Papa Pilgrim. Some of you are going to know a lot about him, some of you aren't going to know very much about him. I want to say, first of all, that this story is not about his family, and it is not about the great community. His children, they were his victims, they were his tools, and in a large way, he was a monster, but he was much more than that. I spent a lot of time in my early years as an adult on the fringe of society, and I mean on the dark edge of it, and I met many scoundrels. And so when I met Papa Pilgrim, it was primarily just intrigue. It's also not about the McCarthy community, but I would like to state very clearly, the McCarthy community, I feel, has a sense of guilt and regret. Maybe they didn't do something sooner, that they didn't find a way to help quicker. But I believe that the Pilgrim story of McCarthy was the McCarthy community's finest hour. It is no accident that after 3 decades, those children were freed in McCarthy. Papa Pilgrim. Well, you really can't write this story. You just couldn't write it. And I want to give you a little bit of background. I'm going to weave around. There's a lot. It's a huge story. I can't even begin to tell it all. But there are some highlights, particularly for those of you that don't know that they're going to matter. Robert Hale was the son of an FBI officer. He wasn't just any FBI officer. He was a high-ranking one. In fact, he was a close associate of Edgar J. Hoover. This means a lot of things, but it definitely means that Pilgrim grew up in the halls of power. When he was a teenager, he eloped with a young woman. Her name was Catherine Connolly. She was 16 years old. She was pregnant with his child. And she was the daughter of the soon-to-be governor of Texas, Governor Connolly, who was in a car, JFK. Whoa. 44 days into their marriage, they were in a hotel room in Florida, and her face was separated from her head by a 28 shotgun blast. And he was free and let go. It was called suicide. And not nearly as heavy, but equally ridiculous. The next 10 years of his life brought him wandering around South America, North America, West Coast, wherever, whatever. But he ended up hooking up with a 16-year-old girl who was the daughter of power and money in Hollywood. And her name is Rose. She became Country Rose. She became Mama Pilgrim. And their story really begins, the Pilgrim family story begins in New Mexico, of all places, on property that was owned by an associate of her parents, Jack Nicholson. I mean, you can't make this. You just can't write this. Now, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean, but he came from a very different world. He went through some very intense things, so there's a lot more. There's a lot more there. I met Papa Pilgrim in 2002. It was early March, or it was late March. It was March. And I had just moved into McCarthy. I had been there off and on for a couple of years, but I moved in full time. And the Pilgrim family, I had only heard that a large family, very exciting family, had just come to visit. And I was finishing dinner in the lodge. There was maybe 30 or 40 people in town at that time. And in walks this incredible group of people. And I just finished eating dinner, and there was bread coming out of the oven, and bread and butter was passed around. And it was a joyous evening, full of laughter and mirth, and they got out their instruments, everyone played an instrument, and they were good musicians. And it was nice. But somewhere in the evening, I casually directed a question at one of the older boys. His name was Joshua. There were 15 children. At that time, they were, 9 months to 24 or something like that, 25. And this was the second oldest boy. And he just kind of forgot, I guess, and he blazed right into my question, answering my question. And what happened was, the joy and mirth of the room went away. A sickening silence descended. Once it was quiet, Pilgrim looked over at Joshua, who was looking at his shoes and shaking. And he said, Joshua, I don't think you're remembering that correctly. Slowly the room reinflated, and I said, whoa, this cat's going to bear watching. And so watch I did. And I saw a lot of things. They moved in, and everything was hunky-dory for a while. Most of the community were very forgiving, very open, as long as you don't steal our stuff. And basically, they got along with people pretty well. There was a percentage of us that definitely smelled a rat, that looked at it all and said, you know, this is too likely to be just dark. And those people tended to just avoid them. But most people befriended them. And Pilgrim was a master at using his children to create something. He was a master at a lot of things in terms of interpersonal interactions. Rasputin kind of comes to mind. I didn't know him, of course, but he was that kind of guy. You know, he exerted influence. And so near the end of our conversation.
Wow, this is really awesome. As I've been watching this tonight, the thought keeps going through my head is this is community. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm honored to be here. This is a story about a lesson that I learned, and it came through a long conversation I had with a man named Robert Hale. And many of you will know him as Papa Pilgrim. And our conversation took 2.5 years to complete. I've never found it easy to walk away from a confrontation. In fact, in my world, if it came to fight or flight, it was fight every time. And why shouldn't it be? I was fighting the good fight, right? Maybe not. Robert Hale, Papa Pilgrim. Some of you are going to know a lot about him. Some of you aren't going to know very much about him. I want to say, first of all, that this story is not about his family, and it is not about the McCarthy community. His children, they were his victims, they were his tools, and in a large way, he was a monster, but he was much more than that. I spent a lot of time in my early years as an adult on the fringe of society, and I mean on the dark edge of it, and I met many scoundrels. And so when I met Papa Pilgrim, I was primarily just intrigued. It's also not about the McCarthy community, but I would like to state very clearly, the McCarthy community, I feel, has a sense of guilt and regret that maybe they didn't do something sooner, that they didn't find a way to help quicker. But I believe that the Pilgrim story in McCarthy was the McCarthy community's finest hour. It is no accident that after 3 decades, those children were freed in McCarthy. I met Papa Pilgrim in 2002. It was early March, or it was late March. It was March. And I had just moved into McCarthy. I had been there off and on for a couple of years, but I moved in full time. And the Pilgrim family, I had only heard that a large family, large, very eclectic family, had just come to visit. And I was finishing dinner in the lodge. There was maybe 30 or 40 people in town at that time. And in walks this incredible group of people. And I just finished eating dinner, and there was bread coming out of the oven, and bread and butter was passed around. And it was a joyous evening, full of laughter and mirth, and they got out their instruments. Everyone played an instrument, and they were good musicians. And it was nice. But somewhere in the evening, I casually directed a question at one of the older boys, and his name was Joshua. And he just kind of forgot, I guess, and he blazed right into my question, answering my question. And what happened was the joy and the mirth in the room went away. A sickening silence descended. And once it was quiet, Pilgrim looked over at Joshua, who was looking at his shoes and shaking. And he said, "Joshua, I don't think you're remembering that correctly." Slowly the room reinflated, and I said, "Whoa, this cat's gonna bear watching." And so watch I did. And so near the end of our conversation, I was faced with a problem. I was faced with an adversary who was my better. You know, I was playing college ball, and he was an all-star, and that was clear. I was faced with a fight that was unwinnable, and I was faced with a set of consequences that would occur from inaction that was unacceptable. So what do I do? And I really didn't have any idea. In those 2.5 years, they created alliances and they created enemies, and they did it intentionally. And forgive me when I say they. I really mean he. Late in this game, as they were losing their allies, the Park Service sent armed rangers up the cat trail, the fresh cat trail they were blazing across Park Service land to stick their finger in the Park Service's face. They sent armed rangers up there to confront them. And the boys surrounded them at gunpoint and forced armed rangers to stand down on Park Service property. Now, I want to tell you what, if you lived in McCarthy at that time and your head wasn't deep in the sand, that was a clear message. Mess with the bull and you're going to get the horns. And everybody paying attention got that message. It's a very strange thing to be involved in something like this, because it wasn't like they were waving guns in your face, but it was actually worse in some ways. I started to lose my patience when I interacted with my community members, and I could feel the physical fear, specifically in the women. I can't even describe it. I can't even describe how that looked, but it was, enough's enough. But I had a problem. Force wasn't going to work. And so much of what happened, you got to understand, McCarthy's a huge set of valleys. I mean, it's 30 miles from that end to that end, and it's 30 miles from that end to that end, and there's valleys, and there's rivers, and there's mountains, and so much of what was happening, no one got to see all of it. No one got to see even a fraction of it. In fact, you'd have incidents where there'd be a group of people over on that side of the valley. They'd come rushing in to talk to their friends and say, "You won't believe what the Pilgrims just did. They did blah, 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 blah." And then the people they're talking to are like, "Oh, that can't be. You know, they just built a shed for us the other day. They're so nice." And this is how it went. But sooner or later, everyone saw what was happening. Early on in their stay, they set up camp in the middle of town. Pretty important piece of information. When I say in the middle of town, I mean in the commons, in the roads, 150 feet from the town center. And they proceeded slowly, but aggressively eventually, they proceeded to create conflict, antagonize, do everything they could to be a nuisance. Now, when I say the commons, I mean public property. I mean our town. And I have nothing against squatting on public property. It's an important reference here. I've done a lot of squatting on public property. In fact, when I moved to McCarthy, 2 summers in a row, I parked a dog team on public property for 6 months each time prior to moving in 2002. So I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is not walking softly when you do that. You know, if you're near private property owners, you know, you become a little mouse. You get real quiet. And they did the exact opposite, and then some. So, 2004, July, a plan was hatched. And the plan was, they're in the downtown. We can't move them by force. They're just way too good at this. So we got all the property owners in the McCarthy town site together, almost all of them. Everyone was on board. Not everybody wanted to pin their name to it, though, out of fear. And they were very clear about that. Anyone that didn't sign was definitely willing to tell me they were afraid of repercussions. And we drafted an eviction notice. And on a day, mid-August, after it was signed by everyone, 4 of us went to deliver it. Now, this is the actual story here. So, I'd been paying attention and I'd seen some things. And what I'd seen, and I finally figured it out, in my life. That's why this story's about me, because I saw something new. And what I saw, what I was trying to figure out, how to beat him, of course. I wanted to win. I also didn't want the women afraid, but, truth to nuts here, I wanted to win. More importantly, I didn't want to lose. So I was trying to figure it out, and what I saw was what his game was. What did winning mean to Papa Pilgrim? And what did losing mean? Well, I figured out that winning to him meant your anger, your frustration, your sustained ill emotion. Meaning, so I saw this, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't think it would matter, for one thing, but I was really just trying to figure out, what am I going to do about this? And so on the morning of probably August 15th, it was about mid-August, 4 of us walked down to deliver this eviction notice, and the eviction notice was for September 15th. That's when we were evicting them. Now, of course, we've got no power. We don't have any coercive power, but, how are we going to do this? Well, that wasn't really important to everyone at the time. We're just going to evict them. And I didn't tell my compadres that I was going down with what I was going to do. But what I was going to do was I was going to not speak. I was going to not talk to him. I was going to observe. And I was going to observe as if I didn't care what was going on. And it was really important that I didn't tell anyone, because it was going to take everything I had to pull this off. You know how you say, hey, I'm going to quit smoking. And as soon as you say it, it's like, well, that was fun. I said it. I thought about it. Let's have a smoke. So I want to make sure I didn't enjoy it beforehand. I need to actually do it. And so we went down there, and they had no idea what I was going to do, and it didn't really matter to them because they were so angry, they were so upset, and they were so sick to their stomach. It was classic. It was masterful. We're down there 9 o'clock in the morning in their sprawling camp, and everyone's out there but Pilgrim. And we said we'd like to see Pilgrim. Kid scurries off, goes up into the hovel he sleeps in, and he didn't come out for 25 minutes. Now, in that 25 minutes, I watched my 3 companions just about burst. Before he got out of the cabin, he had won. If I hadn't been there. And so I settled in to watch. And I watched for a long time. I probably watched for an hour, but before I did anything at all. And what I watched him cast. And I watched as Pilgrim Center, kids on this side, kids on this side, I watched them pull us in. Just keep pulling back and forth, line, reel, until we were close, until my compadres were just out of control. And these were reasonable men that I was with, people that tend to be patient and poised. And at the right moment, as soon as he had us, the entire Pilgrim family rose like a viper. They became aggressive and mean and angry. They showed us who they were. And it was awesome. It was awesome. just sitting here going, whoa, that's intense. And then they'd back off. And then they'd come again. And right about this time, a plan formed. I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. Being silent was all I had come up with. And so, I don't even know why I thought of this. But this is what I did. On their second viperous attack, I raised my hand. And I kept it raised. And I watched, and something strange happened. Pilgrim looked over at me a few times, and a twinkle came in his eye. And he stayed his hand. And he turned to one of my companions, and he said, "Don't you think we ought to let him have a say?" And they're like, "Sure." And he called on me. I said, "Thank you." He was holding a handheld recorder in his hand the entire time. I said, "Pilgrim, see you got a handheld recorder there. What for?" He said, "Well, I want to document this meeting." I said, "That's very interesting. That's exactly why we're here. We have drafted an eviction notice. It states clearly your crimes against the community. It's very self-explanatory. I came here to deliver it and give you notice that you're evicted on September 15th. And that is all I have to say." And I walked away. Now, I can't tell you what happened out of that. Like, I can't describe what the forces were, but it broke the bubble. 30 days later, 70 McCarthy residents assembled at 11 a.m. in front of the McCarthy Lodge. I had a Scrabble board in hand, because when I say we were evicting them, we were moving in. And that's what we did. You want to live here in the streets? Great, we'll join you. And we walked down, and we moved in for the day. And miraculously, I don't know how it happened. I didn't have any discussions. I didn't take any temperatures. But miraculously, what happened is there wasn't any conflict. No one was angry in our 70 people. It was soft power, and it was organic, and it was doing its own thing. It was on a roll. And there was a little bit of nerves there, but the only thing I said to the group the entire time was at the moment we arrived, and I said, "I got a Scrabble board. I need 3 other players." And I sat down and played Scrabble for 3 hours. 30 days after that, the Pilgrims and the camp was gone, never to be reoccupied. A year later, many people in the McCarthy community that had been working behind the scenes. I wasn't involved in this in any way. I just know a lot about it. My neighbors intervened. The children finally felt like they could speak to someone else. They could break ranks, and some of the horror got spoken and got out, and it basically avalanched from there. And by 2006, he was behind bars, and by 2008, he was dead, and that just left the children to deal with the consequences. So I said, the good fight, right? Well, what I learned, and it's an ongoing learning, it's still very fresh and alive in my life. It's a process, it's a transformation. As I learned, there is no good fight. None. What I learned is peace doesn't come out of a barrel of a gun. It doesn't arise from conflict. You know, you can mistakenly see that and see the end of hostilities and think it might, but the only way hostilities end without creating conditions for peace is when everyone else is exhausted from killing and dying and suffering. So my great lesson was there's no winning and winning. And if you're in a fight, you're wrong. Thank you.
Jeremy Kellar. It can be hard for some women to find the right man in Alaska. As we all know, the odds are good, but the goods are odd. But most women seem to at least find a man with a pulse. Our next storyteller fell for a man who died decades before she was even born. Please welcome Trish Winters with a story we call My Dead Boyfriend.
I think that works. Is that good? Good evening. Well, Rob, you gave away a little bit of my punchline here, but I am here to talk about my dead boyfriend. And so this all started this summer of 1999. I went on my epic journey to the little town of Eagle, Alaska. And I was searching for traces of my dead boyfriend, Billy Mitchell. I was going to tell you it's okay, don't feel too bad for me. He died a while ago. I'm kind of over it now, since he died almost 100 years ago. But he became my obsession for a number of years, and I chased him across Alaska. And one of the places that I chased him to was the town of Eagle. So I was invited by the Eagle Historical Society to come for their centennial, and they asked me to speak about my dead boyfriend. Now, I kind of fell for Billy Mitchell in the early 90s when I read his journal. And then I went to Library of Congress and I read his letters. And then I went to Library of Congress again and read more letters and made copies of them and brought them home and posted them on my Facebook page, like any self-respecting stalker does. Don't give me a hard time. I know you've got letters and pictures on your Facebook too from your loved ones. A little different. Maybe they weren't. Maybe those ones are addressed to you. So why did I fall for Billy Mitchell? Well, I read his journal, and he was an interesting person. And he was resourceful, he was hardworking, he was intelligent. And then there were some quirky little things that he did, like he wrote the number 18 on the bottom of his shoe. Then he went to the enlistment officer, and he was not old enough to enlist, but he went up and he said, "Yes, sir, I am over 18. So he cheated just a little bit on some of the stuff that he did. But I was very intrigued by this. I was very intrigued by his kind of out-of-the-box thinking. And so when I got this opportunity to go to Eagle, Alaska, and kind of chase him there and try to find some more about him, I was pretty excited to go. So I had become a single mom, just become a single mom, and I had just been laid off my job. So when they invited me to come, I said, great, I'll need a place to stay. So Elva Scott, who is not Scottish as far as I know, but she had an A-frame there, and she invited me to stay in her A-frame with my children. So I packed up my extended cab, four-wheel drive Chevy Silverado, long bed, with pork and beans, corned beef hash, bicycles, suitcases, and 4 kids. We set out on the road from Fairbanks, heading to Eagle. The truck had a CD player in it, and we had 1 CD for the entire 12 to 14 hours it took us to actually get there. Beach Boys' Greatest Hits. I think I know every song by heart by now. So we headed to Delta Junction, and we headed on to Tok, where we stopped and did the rest stop thing, because I had 4 kids with me. And then we got onto the highway. So we're driving on the highway, and I don't know if you've ever been on the highway to Eagle. You go through Chicken first. So we went through the town of Chicken. But then you're on some pretty interesting driving. And so we're driving along, and it's a beautiful day, and then it's raining. So we come into rain, and I'm focused on the road. And yet it was stunningly gorgeous all around us. It was hard to keep my attention on the road sometimes because the mountains were amazing. And with the rain, everything was just emerald green and dripping, and there was a lot of lichen that the caribou eat, and it was glistening white like my knuckles on the steering wheel of this windy road. So we're winding along, and on the left, there's the big drop-off that the year before a tour bus had gone over and all 70 people on board died. So I'm trying to stay away from there, but I'm also trying to stay away from getting sucked into the mud on this side of the road. So I'm driving, and the kids are just singing away, "Help me, Rhonda, help me, Rhonda." And I'm driving, and I come around a corner, and there are 2 lawn chairs at the side of the road with 2 people sitting in them. No house for miles. No kind of abode for miles. I screech, put on the brakes, and I stop, and I look, and we roll down the windows, and we're like, "Are you guys okay?" Because behind them in the ditch is a really big RV. Wheels up. Completely upside down in the ditch. And they said, "We're fine." We crawled out with our sat phone, called our son. He's on his way. So they turned down my offer to go surf and safari with me. And so we left them at the side of the road, halfway between nowhere and nowhere. So we headed back out onto the road. We're driving. I come up to a corner, and I'm feeling like, there's not a lot of room for my big pickup already on this windy road. It's pretty narrow. It seemed like the narrower the road got, the broader the country got, and the more beautiful and the more vast and the more expansive it got. But I come up to a corner, and right around the corner comes a fuel truck. I didn't even think there was room for me. I didn't know there was room for a fuel truck, but somehow it got by me. It apparently had made that run a few times. So I'm like this, driving, and the kids are like singing about California girls, wish they all could be California. So we finally roll into town, and I am so ready to be there and start finding out about Billy Mitchell. Well, we got to work doing what we were there to do, which was to give a presentation about Billy Mitchell. And so I wrote a play, and there were 4 children in that play. Go figure. Because you use what you got. And so we put on a presentation, and we were so excited because the Centennial Weekend, the governor was flying in. Only the governor came on Saturday, and our play was on Friday, so Tony Knowles didn't see it, but he could have seen it if he'd come on Friday, but he didn't. He came on Saturday. So Saturday dawn, the sun was shining, it was amazing, the rain was done. 2 big Chinook helicopters fly into Eagle and land on the parade ground that leads down to the Yukon River. Old customs house is there, the old Presbyterian church, but there's this huge parade ground because Eagle is where the Army had a very important fort. This very important fort had a very unique name. It was called Fort Egbert. I didn't make that up. It was called Fort Egbert, and it's actually, Eagle is the place where James Wickersham had his first courthouse. So this was a very important place around the time of the gold rush. Well, Billy Mitchell was there. Around the turn of the century, he spent almost 3 years in that region. Now, he was 21. I was a little bit older, I couldn't decide if that made me a cougar or the opposite, which the Urban Dictionary says is called a gerbil. But I was there where Billy Mitchell had been, where he walked, where he lived, where he dog mushed. So we did our presentation, we did our play Friday night. Saturday, the governor flew in with a bunch of GIs, and Senator Georgiana Lincoln came in also. And we had speeches and games, and it was an amazing day. They got ready to leave, and one of the Chinooks had broken down. So the other Chinook and the other smaller helicopter that had the governor went ahead and left. But we had a built-in baseball team with the GIs who got left behind. So we played midnight baseball on the parade ground leading down to the Yukon River. We got up a dance. We had a dance at the Redmonds Hall. We had a blast. We just had so much fun. As Billy Mitchell would say, a good time was had by all. So the next day, the other Chinook came back. They brought the parts, they fixed it up, and then they flew out. It was a great day. Had a lot of fun. We really enjoyed our time. I got to hang out with Elva Scott and find out more about the Historical Society and what Billy Mitchell did and where he lived. And Jim Dungan was living in Eagle, and he took me on a six-wheeler all around the old fort and showed me where the water pipes used to go. Got to see a lot of stuff. John Borg, the postmaster at the time, took us out and showed us the cuts in the trees where the telegraph line had gone through, because that's what Billy Mitchell was there to do. He was going to put through a telegraph line in the area that nobody seemed to be able to put one through. 21 years old, he shows up and he says, "I know how to do this. I can do this. We're going to do it in the winter." Everybody thought he was crazy. He's not from Alaska. He doesn't know what he's doing. So he gets all the men ready. The Yukon's frozen solid. He's got the supply trains ready, and his plan was he was going to use these supply sleds to bring out the cable and the insulators and the wood and get that all stashed, and then they would come back in the summer and they would set up the tripods and get the insulators on and get the telegraph line through. So the day came that they were supposed to start out, and it was about 60 below. They had the old-timers thermometer, which was the different bottles of things. So when this bottle freezes, you know it's this cold. When this bottle freezes, it's this cold. So one of them was kerosene, one of them was mercury. And when it gets cold enough, mercury freezes, and they could load it on sleds in bars. So this was one of those kind of days. So the time came, they started out onto the ice, and all the packers revolted. And they said, "You're gonna get us killed. We're not gonna go." So how did 21-year-old Billy Mitchell handle that? He said, "Okay, you're all fired. Get your stuff and leave." And then he handpicked men who were familiar with the country, who knew how to be out in 60 below, men like Randy, who know what you do when it's cold out. And so those are the men that he used, and they actually did do that. They were able to sled all the equipment out and get it all stashed. Came back in the summer, set up the tripods, got the cable on it, the insulators. It all worked. He got it all connected. He did what he said he was going to do, and he was successful. So I was very pleased to get to be there and to get to see that and to see the places he had talked about in his journal. But then it was time to go back and face reality. Went back to Fairbanks with my kids and my new job, and I still felt like I hadn't really met up with him, you know. We hadn't had any kind of good talk while I was there. So I needed to do something more. So a little bit of time went by, and I met my husband, Scott. I met a wonderful man. My husband, Scott, is Scottish. I'm wearing his tartan. And he actually wore a kilt in our wedding, a kilt and a sporran, and it was awesome. But he was kind of amused by my obsession with Billy Mitchell. My daughter's the one who coined the term mom's dead boyfriend, since I kind of dragged them all over the place looking for him. So when I told Scott that I was going to fly down to Wisconsin to kind of look for a little bit more of Billy Mitchell's background and history, he was indulgent and tolerant. So I went down to Wisconsin and I visited his grave, Billy Mitchell's grave, and it kind of hit home that, you know what, he's really gone. Seemed like a little bit of a shock. I cried and went to Ben Franklin's and bought all the makings and made a wreath. And went back to the cemetery the next day and put it on the grave and cried again, and I wrote him a note. That I put on the grave, and I don't know what the guy at the cemetery thought. I wondered how long it had been since somebody had cried at his grave. Maybe a little while. So to kind of cheer myself up, the next day I went and toured Meadowmere, which was Billy Mitchell's childhood home. Now this wasn't quite as easy as you might think, because it's no longer a home. It sort of is. It's a nursing home. But one of the things that's very cool is they kept up the family pictures on the walls. And it's a very beautiful building. And they very kindly let me come into the public areas. And I walked in and I was feeling kind of desolate and I was feeling kind of sad. And it's kind of like what Jerry was talking about, kind of going back to your old place and looking for those memories. And I was feeling a little bit low. And I came around a corner and there was a picture of Billy Mitchell when he was about eight or 9 years old. And he's wearing a kilt with a sporran. And I got to thinking about some similarities between Billy Mitchell and my husband. They're both very resourceful. They're both very strong men. They're both Alaskan or love Alaska. But Scott had one really major advantage. He was alive, had a heartbeat. And I suddenly thought that at this point then, many-year journey of chasing Billy Mitchell was maybe to just keep me single long enough for the 12 years I was a single mom, to finally find the man that I was supposed to marry. I think Billy Mitchell was maybe just the training wheels. He was getting me ready for the man that I was going to marry. And I suddenly realized that everything I wanted was in Alaska. So I got on the plane and I came home. And I love you, baby. Thank you.
Trish Winners. All right, so we've all done some crazy things for love in our lives. Our next storyteller was willing to get into some serious doo-doo for his wife. Please welcome our final storyteller telling the funniest story about a goose I've ever heard. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Steve Newmuth with a story we call What We Do for Love. And I loved it when the military bombed the ice dams on the Tanana River to save Fairbanks from flooding in the early 60s. Guess I didn't feel like doing that again or something. Anyway. All right, so we've all done some crazy things for love in our lives. Our next storyteller was willing to get into some serious doo-doo for his wife. Please welcome our final storyteller telling the funniest story about a goose I've ever heard. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Steve Newmuth for the story we call What We Do for Love.
Well, I have a fun story about a goose. Got a great wife. do a lot of great things for your wife. If you really love your wife, you'll do just about anything for her. And this story pretty much goes there. So we raised animals. We raised ducks and chickens. We raised lots of pigs and lots of chickens, and then more chickens. And we had sheep, we had goats, and then I made the error of buying her 2 Toulouse geese. They're cute geese, and they grew bigger and bigger, and they grew big. These are big geese. Big geese are like dogs when they do their thing in the morning. They were big piles. And these geese loved my wife so much, and these were not just like farm animals, these were pets, that they wanted to always meet her at the door. So they would waddle up the steps, 3 steps to my deck, and they would wait at the door for her to come out. And in the process, they would leave me things to clean up. To where, if you've ever had 5-gram soles, and you've ever stepped in goose poop, you have an experience getting it clean. But they would leave piles all around the deck. I would come up with a putty knife and I would scrape them off, especially in the winter. Because in the winter they would become like solid, and I would have to chisel them off. But I love my wife, and she never really wanted to clean up after the animals. So she was going on a trip, a big trip. She was going to go to California. She was all excited. She was going to go visit her mom. And it was Wednesday, and I took her to the airport, dropped her off, and she said, "Now remember, you have to take care of the goose. I want those." I got this one spot here. One of the geese we had they were called Cinder and Ella. And unfortunately, a stray dog came into the yard and killed Cinder. Cinder died. We were all in white, we were in black for a while. But, life went on, except this time, Ella, the remaining goose, the female, she was really lonely. She didn't have her guys, so she hung out on the deck all the time. And it was really a mess. I built her a big house. I put a heater in it, I put hay in it. She wouldn't have nothing to do. Giant barn, a house for her. I put a battery pad heater in it. I thought, this is good. Nothing. So she still hung up on the deck. So my wife took off on this trip. She said, "You make sure that you take care of my last goose. I need to make sure I said, "I got this goose covered, no problem." Food, water, everything. I had a pad underneath the water to make sure it stayed so that the goose could drink. Took her to the airport, dropped her off, came home, checked the goose at night, everything was good. Left Thursday morning for work, goose was fine. Came home Thursday night, went out on the deck, food was fine, the water was fine. Of course, the goose was on the deck, but I got so tired of keeping it off the deck, I just said, forget it. It was 30 below zero, it was cold. I just said, live and let live. I went inside, cooked dinner. Friday night, I came back and pulled in the garage, walked out on the deck, and the goose was on the deck again. Funny, the goose was in the same place. And I thought, that's odd. She always would move a little when I came over. So I took a walk over. The goose was like a statue. And I looked around the outside of the goose, and it was a real poop. She was frozen solid to the deck. I mean, she was solid. Like that thing solid. So I thought, oh God, this is finally my way. You can't rip the street below zero. I'm going to get this goose off the deck. There's only one way. I got to do the goose in. This is my opportunity.